Before Steam, before Xbox Live, before downloading a demo was even a thing, game previews looked very, very different. Back in the early 1980s, gaming companies didn't really market demos, they experimented with them, and weirdly enough, some of the first true public playable game demos weren't on the NES or Sega Genesis, or even early PCs. They were on the Atari 8-bit computer line, and one of those games is what you can see on screen right now. Because long before the internet, Atari games were quietly being distributed in the most low-tech but genius way possible. Magazine demo discs. Open a magazine like Analog Computing or Antic, and tucked inside was a floppy containing a tiny slice of a game, maybe just one level, one mechanic, or a small teaser, and this was revolutionary. For the first time ever, players could actually try something before buying it. Not a screenshot, not a review, a real interactive piece of the game. Publishers didn't fully realize it yet, but they had accidentally created one of the most powerful marketing tools gaming would ever have. The small idea from Atari's demo discs would eventually evolve into shareware, then blockbuster, console demo discs, and ultimately help sell millions of games. And then suddenly, game demos died. Today we're diving into why the industry abandoned one of its most player-friendly features, and what killed the golden age of the video game demo. In 1993, ID Software released the first Doom, and when they did, they didn't just launch a game. They launched a weaponized demo, a playable slice so addictive, so perfectly constructed, and so easy to spread that it took over schools, offices, universities, and pretty much every early internet bulletin board in existence. What the first Doom did for demos is the equivalent of what Fortnite did for live service games. It didn't invent the idea, but it just perfected it, and then dominated the world with it. December 10th, 1993, ID Software uploads a file called doom1.wad to an FTP server at the University of Wisconsin. It's not the full game, it's not even a timed trial, it's episode 1, Knee Deep in the Dead, the shareware version of Doom. 1/3 of the full game, completely free, unlimited play, no restrictions. Just aim, shoot, repeat forever, yours to keep. And in minutes the servers crashed. Not from hackers, not from a DDoS, but from students frantically trying to download the game so fast and so relentlessly that the network literally collapsed. This was the first time a demo had broken a university network, but it wouldn't be the last. The brilliance of Doom's demo wasn't accidental. ID Software built the entire game around the concept of a free, highly polished first episode, with the remaining content locked behind a purchase. This was bold, almost dangerous at the time. Imagine giving away 1/3 of your entire game today, with no DRM, no keys, no enforcements of any kind. But here's the twist. People weren't stealing the game, they were just sharing the demo. Friends passed it to friends, magazines printed it on covers, shops left piles of floppy disks on counters labelled Take One, bulletin boards saw thousands of uploads per day. Parents brought it home from work, kids snuck it into computer labs. Doom didn't spread like a game, it spread like a virus, and a good one at that. And once people finished episode 1, they needed more, they wanted more, so they ended up inevitably paying for the game. This shareware system, this demo economy, made Doom one of the most profitable PC games of its decade, without traditional retail distribution. Doom's first episode wasn't just a sample, it was a carefully engineered addicted loop. Level 1 teaches you movement, shooting, pacing. Level 2 exposes you to Doom's famous verticality and keycard flow. Level 3 shows off big rooms, monster closets and complex traps. And by level 4 you understand Doom's atmosphere, tense, dark. Level 5 hooks you with large arenas. Then to level 6, it teases you with the game's difficulty. Level 7 introduces hellish level design, and at level 8, leaves you wanting more. Every new stage, as you can see from the demo, feels deeper and more intense. This wasn't a 2-minute taste test, this was hours of content, enough time to build attachment, to build mastery, and enough time to make you want the rest of the game. And that's why Doom's shareware demo is still studied in game design classes today, because of its success and how creative it was at the time. The magic of Doom wasn't just its level design or technology, it was the distribution method they used. Free to copy, free to share, free to upload, free to modify, free to distribute in magazines, legal to duplicate at school, work and at home. And at any time when game companies feared piracy, ID Software weaponized it. And you couldn't imagine something or a game company in the modern day doing something like this. The more people that copied the demo, the more people saw the game, and the more people who played episode 1, the more people bought episode 2 and 3. It was the marketing campaign of the decade, and it cost ID Software nothing. Doom wasn't advertised on TV, it didn't have posters, it didn't get a global billboard campaign. The demo was the marketing, and it worked better than anything the industry had ever seen. Doom's demo was so successful that it reshaped PC gaming for nearly 10 years. Wolfenstein 3D used it, Duke Nukem, Heretic, Command & Conquer, Diablo, Quake, all used the same tactics that ID Software used with Doom. Publishers learned that giving away the right piece of a game could sell the rest of the game far more effectively than any trailer ever could. For almost a decade, every major PC game was expected to have a demo, because Doom proved it made money. Shareware wasn't a trend, it was now a new business model in gaming. But then, something changed. Despite the success, despite the cultural impact, despite Doom being literally built on the power of a good demo, the practice faded. PC demos declined, console demos shrank, and eventually they faded into obscurity. For a long time, game demos were seen as a promise. A simple way for players to answer one question: is this game actually fun, and is it actually worth my time? But somewhere in the late 2000s, that promise became a problem. As the industry grew bigger, budgets ballooned, teams got larger, and expectations skyrocketed. Publishers started noticing something uncomfortable. Demos weren't always increasing sales like they did back with Doom. In many cases, they were doing the opposite. During the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era, demos were everywhere. Almost every major release had one. Shooters, racers, RPGs. You could try nearly anything before you bought it. Even massive franchises like Halo leaned into demos, letting players jump into a single mission or slice of multiplayer to get the feel for the game before it launched. For players, it felt like a golden age, but behind the scenes, publishers were tracking something players never saw: conversion rates. They began asking how many people who downloaded a demo actually went to buy the full game, and what they found out was unsettling. For some games, demos worked exactly as intended, but for some others, demos became a filter. Players would download the demo, play it for 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes, and decide they'd already seen enough. Sometimes because the game wasn't good, but sometimes because the demo revealed performance issues or awkward designs, and other times because the demo gave away the best part of the experience: a strong opening mission, a memorable set piece, or a polished first level, like the kind you'd find in a Halo demo. A player who might have taken a chance based on a trailer now had a reason not to buy. This is the uncomfortable truth about demos, and that's they don't lie. They can't hide behind scripted events or videos that are put together carefully to show a game in a certain light. Trailers can hide the jank. They can hide bad controls, and they can hide repetitive gameplay, but the moment a controller is in your hands, there's no escaping how the game actually feels. If a game has a slow opening, clunky tutorials, poor performance, or mechanics that only get good later, a demo doesn't forgive that. It exposes it, and publishers started to realize something critical. A player who never touches the game might still buy it, but a player who tries it and dislikes it almost certainly will not. From a business perspective, that's terrifying for these big companies. Marketing teams leaned harder into trailers because trailers were safe. They sell mood, feelings and emotions. They sell fantasy. They sell potential. Demos, on the other hand, sell reality, and reality is messy and not perfect. There's an old saying in marketing, and that's don't give the customer a reason to say no. Demos were starting to do exactly that. So the mindset shifted. Instead of let them try it and decide, it became show them what we want them to show and let the momentum do the rest. The demo stopped being a tool and started becoming a liability for these big companies. And this wasn't about greed or laziness, it was about risk. When games cost tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to make, every lost sale matters. Demos ironically became too honest for an industry built on hype. And it's something we see still affecting the gaming industry today, with so many games showing trailers that just are not the reality of the game that we get. And the truth is, if companies were honest, then they would put a game demo out. If their game was actually good and what they promised, they would have no problem showing people what the game is really like. But this is from an age of gaming that has long passed. And now we're stuck in the modern day where many developers lie or manipulate their audience to get sales. And I'm not saying this is always the case, but it seems like there's too many examples nowadays. No Man's Sky in 2016, Watch Dogs in 2014, Aliens Colonial Marines in 2013, Cyberpunk 2077 more recently in 2020, Anthem in 2019. I could go on forever. And this is why it's so sad to see the practice of video game demos dying out, because it gave players insight and more security, especially as games are getting even more expensive. It becomes way more risky. As traditional demos started to disappear, they weren't replaced with nothing. They were replaced with alternatives such as open betas, closed betas, early access, and free weekends. On the surface, it looked like demos had simply evolved, but in reality, something important was lost. Open betas became the most common replacement, especially during the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era, and exploding even further when the PlayStation 4 launched. Publishers framed them as a chance to try the game early, but their real purpose was very different. A beta isn't designed to sell you on the experience. It's designed to test servers, stress the systems, and gather data before the game actually launches, which means what players get isn't a polished slice of the game, but an unfinished one. Balance is off, performance is unstable, content is missing, and systems are all half-baked. And when players walk away from a beta, confused or underwhelmed, the excuse is always the same: it's just a beta. But that also means it fails at the one thing demos did the best: showing the game at its best. Traditional demos were curated. They were carefully chosen slices, often built specifically to hook the player. A beta, by contrast, throws you into the middle of an evolving product and asks you to judge it anyway. That's not a demo, that's unpaid testing. Early access pushed this even further. What used to be a free taste of a finished game became a paid preview of an unfinished one. Players weren't just trying the game, they were funding its development, reporting bugs, and waiting months or years for completion. For some developers, early access worked, but as a replacement for demos, it flipped the entire relationship on its head. Instead of earning trust by letting players try before they buy, studios asked players to buy before the game was ready. Free weekends came closer to the old idea, but even they had their limits. They were time-gated, often overloaded servers, and usually arrived long after launch, when first impressions no longer mattered. And then there were trials, locked behind subscriptions, 1 or 2 hours of play hidden behind a paywall, available only on certain users, technically a demo, but stripped of the accessibility that made demos powerful in the first place. And these usually commonly came with a high price tag, paying extra for deluxe editions to play early. The biggest difference between these alternatives and classic demos is the intent. Demos existed to convince you. They were confident enough to say, here it is, try it and decide for yourself. However, betas existed to extract value, data, stress test servers, increase word of mouth for pre-orders. None of them are built purely around player trust. And that's why, even though demos never truly vanished, they stopped feeling the same. Because a demo respected your time, it showed you the best version of the game it could, and then it stepped back and let you decide. Modern alternatives don't do that. They ask you to commit early, forgive flaws, and believe things will get better. And in doing so, they quietly replaced one of gaming's most honest traditions with something far less player friendly. And this is a trend we are continuing to see in the gaming industry, prioritizing profit over creativity and player trust. I think one of the best recent examples of this was Battlefield 2042. In the past, Battlefield games often had strong demos or tightly controlled previews that showed the series at its best. Large-scale battles, polished gunplay, and clear class roles. By the time Battlefield 2042 was approaching release, that approach was completely gone. Instead of a traditional demo, players were given an open beta. On paper, it sounded generous. Large maps, full multiplayer matches, access for millions of players. But what people actually played wasn't a carefully chosen slice designed to impress. It was an unfinished build that exposed every weakness at once. Performance issues were obvious immediately. Bugs were everywhere, movement felt off, gunplay felt unfinished, and core Battlefield systems like class identity and teamwork were stripped back. And for many players, the beta wasn't a preview, it was the decision publishers and developers made, and they responded the same way we've seen again and again. This is an old build, this isn't representative of the final game, and it will be fixed by launch. But that response highlights the exact problem. A traditional demo would never be defended like that. A demo was supposed to represent the game at its best, not ask players to imagine what it might be like in a few months or years. The Battlefield 2042 beta didn't build trust, it destroyed it. For many players, it was the moment they cancelled pre-orders or decided to wait until release. And when the final game launched with many of the same issues still present in the beta, it retroactively became the most honest version of the product anyone had seen. This is why open betas are a poor replacement for demos. They don't curate the experience, they don't control first impressions, and they don't respect the player's time or expectations. Instead of saying, here's our best foot forward, they say, this isn't finished, but judge it anyway. And once the first impression is set, no amount of post-launch fixes can undo it, unless you're Hello Games and No Man's Sky. In trying to replace demos with betas, publishers didn't just change the format, they changed the relationship. And what used to be a confident invitation to try before you buy became a gamble, one where the players brunt the risk. And for a medium built on trust, that shift did more damage than most studios ever expected. It's the main reason why EA has such a terrible reputation nowadays, for this exact practice of deception and lying to gamers. So, after decades of change, one thing has become clear. Game demos didn't disappear because players stopped wanting them. They disappeared because the industry stopped trusting them. But as the dust settles, and as players become more cautious, more skeptical, and more burned by broken launches, the conversation around demos is quietly shifting again. Because for all the talk about demos being obsolete, something interesting has been happening in the background, and that's that they're coming back. Not in the loud blockbuster way they existed in the 2000s, and not at the scale they once had, but in the place where trust still matters. Demos are proving their value all over again. The strongest evidence of this comes from the PC space. Steam's Next Fest has become one of the most successful discovery events in modern gaming, built almost entirely around one thing: free demos. For a limited time, players can download hundreds of demos, no paywalls, no pre-orders, and no commitment, and the results speak for themselves. Games featured in the Next Fest regularly see massive wishlist spikes, strong launch sales, and long-term viability that trailers alone simply don't achieve. Developers have openly said that a strong demo during Next Fest on Steam can do more for a game than months of traditional marketing. This isn't nostalgia, that's data. We've also seen major publishers quietly reverse course. Capcom, a company that once leaned heavily on betas and limited trials, has made a point of releasing polished, confident demos again. Some examples include Resident Evil 7, the Resident Evil 2 remake and 4 remake, as well as more recently with Street Fighter 6. These weren't rough previews or technical tests, they were curated slices designed to show the game at its best, and they worked. Each demo generated huge online buzz, strong word of mouth, and momentum heading into the launch. Square Enix has also followed a similar path with long-form demos for their games Dragon Quest, Octopath Traveler, and Final Fantasy. In several cases, these demos were multiple hours long, with progress carrying over into the full game on release. That level of transparency doesn't come from fear. It comes from confidence. Even beyond AAA, demos are becoming a signal of trust. Games like Lies of P and Wo Long Fallen Dynasty built anticipation precisely because players could feel the game and not just watch it on their screens. And that's the difference. Trailers create hype, whereas demos create belief. So should demos return? Not every game needs one, I'm not saying that. But in an industry struggling with credibility, demos are no longer a liability anymore. They're a statement of trust. They say, we believe in this game enough to let you play it before you pay. And the studios willing to say that are already being rewarded for it. The future of game demos isn't about going backwards, it's about rebuilding trust. Because when players can try before they buy, hype becomes optional, and quality community is allowed to speak for itself. So all of this brings us to where we are now. Game demos didn't die because they stopped working. They died because the industry changed. Bigger budgets, bigger risk, and a growing desire to control the message instead of trusting the product. We went from an era where Doom could give away a third of its game and dominate the world, to a time where publishers are afraid to let players touch anything. Demos were replaced by trailers, betas, and early access subscriptions, systems that ask for trust without always earning it. And yet, whenever demos are allowed to return, when studios are confident enough to say try it for yourself, they still work. So the question isn't whether demos belong in gaming, it's whether the industry is willing to be honest enough to support them. I want to know what you think down in the comments. Do you miss traditional game demos? Have betas and early access replaced them for you or made things worse? Do you have any bad experiences that you'd like to share? And would you be more likely to buy games if demos were made available for them? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what your experiences are. And if you've enjoyed this video and want more deep dives into gaming history, industry shifts, and the stories behind how games are really made, then make sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button on the channel. It genuinely helps me out so much. And if you want to keep watching, check out some of my other videos that I have on my channel. I cover so much in gaming and tech, such as retrospectives, breakdowns, and video essays. But with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.